Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be comparing the Artistro acrylic paint markers to the POSCA markers and finding out whether they are a good cheap alternative to them. So we have the set of 15 POSCA markers which cost around £46, and the set of 30 Artistro paint markers which cost £30 from Amazon, give or take a little bit of pence. And here they both are. I really like the packaging of the Artistro markers, and just for full disclaimer, Artistro sent these for me to try for free, but all the opinions in this video are my own. I much prefer the packaging of the Artistro markers. They have a nicer clasp and the cardboard is much thicker and you have a nice handle and it just looks that nicer in my opinion. Whereas the POSCA pens, it looks okay, it's nice and bright, but it's a very flimsy packaging. They might be alternative packagings though, so I'm not going to criticise it too harsh, but I do prefer the packaging of the Artistro markers. So if we open up the Artistro markers, you can see there are 30 colours and they are all labelled and they all correspond with the labels on the back. And when you take the pen out, they look quite similar to the POSCA pens, but they have their own little design on them. They look very similar, although the Artistro pens that I'm using are a thinner nib, so the pen is thinner, and we have the classic POSCA marker here. And they are very similar in the design. You have the nib of both. As you can see, the Artistro ones are a thinner one. But yeah, they do look very similar and feel very similar as well. Almost put them back in the wrong boxes there. Well done. And also with the Artistro pens, you do get some nibs as well, where you don't with the POSCA pens, which is a little disappointing because if you're paying that much money, you would want some spare nibs, really. And I've already done a first impressions video of the Artistro pens, and I will give a link to that in the card above and down below. But for now, I'm going to swatch the POSCA pens, and I just shook it so hard that the lid fell off. So for any paint pens, you have to shake them up, shake it like a Polaroid picture, and just activate it by kind of pressing down on the paper several times. And then once the paint has come down the pen, you are all good to go. And I was quite pleased with how the POSCA pens worked. The paint came out quite quickly and there wasn't really much clogging, which can be an issue with paint pens, and the ink was nice and opaque. So that was good. So I just swatched all of the colours. There's a lot less colours to swatch with the POSCA pens. I don't usually like swatching art supplies. If you are familiar with my channel, you know that I'm quite lazy and I just tend to go for it, but because I'm comparing the two, I did swatch them for you. So these are my POSCA colours. Quite a good range. I think there's probably a bit too much orange in this set as well. For such a small set, there's a bit too much orange for my liking, but the caps do match like the Artistro pens. They do match quite nicely. So now I'm going to compare how the ink flows when I stop throwing them around. And we have the nibs, and I will say the nibs on the Artistro pens were, to me, better. Whereas the POSCA pens, they did tend to fray and kind of crumble a little bit, but it might be because I was using paper. I don't know, but I didn't find that this happened with the Artistro pens. I thought the nibs were a bit better on the Artistro pens, in my opinion. And now I'm just going to add some paint from the Artistro pens and the POSCA pens onto some paper just to compare them. And what I find with the Artistro pens is they are a little bit more watery. This could have been that I wasn't shaking them enough, so you do really have to shake them because it does separate. And the Artistro pens do take that little bit longer to dry, I think because they are a little bit more watery in their consistency, whereas the POSCA pens dry quite quickly. But you do get an opaque coverage with the POSCA pens, you just maybe have to do a couple of layers. And now I'm just comparing the whites on some black paper. And again, the white of the Artistro pen wasn't as opaque on the first layer as the POSCA pen. You can see a difference. But when I was drawing my little Charlies, because I can't really do a swatching video without drawing a Charlie, once I'd shaken the Artistro pen a little bit more and I'd done a couple of layers, it did look much more opaque. So I would advise, if you buy the Artistro pens, that you just make sure you shake them before every use. And here I am just adding the second layer, and as you can see, it does make that much of a difference. I didn't have to do this with the POSCA pen, but later on I found I did have to do it with certain colours, so that isn't necessarily a negative mark for the Artistro pens over the POSCA pens. So for the artwork for this video, I am going to be painting on a Pokemon card for each pen, and that Wigglytuff is the biggest mood of 2020/2021 I've ever seen. And I think I'm going to do Lapras for the POSCA pens, and I'm going to paint on a Pokemon card with both the POSCA pens and the Artistro pens and just kind of compare them. So we're starting off with the Lapras, and I'm just, first of all, just covering most of it blue. I really wanted to do this for quite a while, painting on Pokemon cards, because the idea is you kind of extend the background out from the Pokemon to cover the text and stuff. So that's what I did, and for the blue I only needed to do one layer. It was quite opaque and it covered it quite well. This wasn't the case though for the yellow that I was doing for the sunbeams. I had to do about 3 or 4 layers for that one, because I think with yellow paint it's not always the most pigmented, and you do just need a few layers just to get a good opaque coverage. And because these dried quite quickly, it did please me because I'm very impatient and I like just going for it. And I did try and do a little bit of blending, but if you do blend with paint pens, then make sure you clean the tips of the pens after you're done, because otherwise you'll get the darker or the lighter colour kind of staining the nib. So you just have to make sure you've got a spare piece of paper handy, which is always good for paint pens anyway, because you might have to activate them if they get clogged. But the POSCA pens didn't really get clogged. That was quite good. They were quite nice and smooth and opaque. And here is the love disc. I'm doing an extra Pokemon on each card because I thought that would be a cute idea. But with the pink, again, I did need to do an extra layer because you could see the blue coming through. So I just built up a few layers and extended the Lapras's paw. I don't really think it's a paw, it's more of a thin. It's more of a thin, I don't really know. But yeah, and then added some white and yellow to the sky to make it a nice sun ray, and added some blue, some darker blue and green and white to the water, and added the details onto the love disc. And I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I think it looks like water. Maybe if I'd have had some more colours with the POSCA markers, it would have looked a little bit more like water, but for the kind of cartoony water, I think it looks okay, and I was very pleased with how this turned out. And I'm just adding the final touches now with the white over the top. And yes, my hands are very messy because I kept touching the bit of paper that I was using to kind of scribble on and, you know, to activate the pens on. So that is why my hands are messy. But yeah, I was really pleased with how this one turned out. And now on to the Artistro Pokemon card. So for this one, I decided to add some gesso because I knew the consistency was that little bit thinner, which isn't necessarily a problem, but I thought adding some gesso to the top of a darker colour would help. And of course, I was going to use the pastel-y colours of this Galarian Ponyta in the background to extend out. I chose the Galarian Ponyta for this one because there are quite a lot of nice pastel shades in the Artistro set, which are really nice, and it would really fit quite nicely. There's quite a lot of pastel greens and blues and purples, and I thought it would fit really well. So first of all, I just, like I did with the Lapras card, just did a base of the colours and added a couple of layers. I didn't really have to do too many more layers than the POSCA pens. I think a couple of things like the Morlul I had to do a couple of layers on, and the purple background and the paler green, but it wasn't really that much different to the POSCA pens in the end. But that might be because I put gesso on. I was quite surprised, but again, I was shaking my pens better than I was earlier, so just remember to shake the pens so the paint doesn't separate. And there's not really too much of a problem with clogging with either of the pens. I have had some cheap paint pens before that just clog and clog and clog, and you just have to keep like shaking them and activating them, and that can be really quite annoying. I did have that problem when I was painting on the tambourine with these pens, but that was more to do with the surface that I was on than the pens themselves. So yeah, I didn't really see that there was a great difference in these pens really for the price, because there was more colours in the Artistro and I found the nibs to be nicer and they were cheaper. So they are, in my opinion, a good cheap alternative for POSCA pens. The only real difference to me is that sometimes the ink is more opaque and you need less layers in some of the colours of the POSCA pens than you do with the Artistro pens. And the Artistro pens is that little bit more watery, but this isn't necessarily a problem if you're okay adding some layers and you make sure you shake up the pens. So to me, if I was a beginner buying paint pens, I would probably opt for the Artistro because you get more colours and the nibs are a lot nicer and a lot more robust than those of the POSCA pens. I found the POSCA pens were disintegrating a tiny bit, which surprised me. But yeah, I like both pens, don't get me wrong, but I do like the colours in the Artistro set, and I think I would recommend those before buying the POSCA pens, especially if you're a beginner. So once I had finished the paint part of the Pokemon cards, I used my fine liner just to outline the Pokemon that I'd added on, because I thought that it would make them stand out that little bit more, and I just added a few details to the pathway and the grass on the Ponyta card. And now I'm just doing the same to the love disc. And what is going on with my hair there? I really need a haircut, but no hairdressers are open at the moment. So I have a nice little Ace Ventura quiff going on. Look at that, that is awful. I'm very sorry. But moving on from my hair problems, I added some nail polish or nail varnish. Do you call it nail polish or do you call it nail varnish? Let me know in the comments below, because me and my friend Amanda have a constant argument about it. She thinks it's nail polish, I say nail varnish. So let me know. And I'm just adding some glitter, especially to the Ponyta, because Galarian Ponyta is just fabulous and she needs some glitter. So we have some kind of purpley glitter and some silver glitter too. And I added some silver glittery nail varnish to the water of the Lapras too. So let me know in the comments below which one is your favourite. I also don't think you can really tell which one unless you look really closely, unless you were like a paint pen expert and you had a PhD in paint pens. I don't think you would necessarily be able to tell the difference. I like both of them, I think they both turned out well. But let me know in the comments below which one is your favourite and whether you've tried the Artistro markers and if you like them compared to the POSCA markers. I'm always up for reading your guys' opinions. But these are my finished cards. Here is the Lapras. Once I've rearranged my pens. No, here is the Ponyta. And it's very sparkly. And a little Morlul poking out. There we go. And here is the Lapras card with the POSCA pens. So that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, if you like this video, emotionally, please do leave it a like down below, as that really does help me out. But that is all for today's video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.